Hey guys, welcome back to Chris and Retro. Tonight's video is going to be on guilt. I'm going to talk about a few things on guilt and some of the pitfalls that guilt can bring. But start off, we had a really good day today. I got my daughters, all three of them. We went out to the down by the lake and just really enjoyed the outdoors. Pretty windy here, nice and warm, and it was just a really nice day to get out and get some fresh air before our winters start hitting us. It seems like it's just right around the corner again. We got some good news. Our friend Taylor, she won by unanimous decision today. So congratulations, Taylor. And I guess she fights again in September, but that was a pretty exciting win for her. The opponent was a lot taller than her. I was kind of surprised by that. She, I guess, took it to her. So that's congratulations, Taylor. That's awesome. And Randy, congratulations on another win for your gym. Tonight's video is important to me because I think it's a pitfall that I have in my journey. And this conversation was triggered. I'm actually reading this book, and I've got it laying around here somewhere. I don't know. It's over here. It is. Max Lucado. I think I've referenced this before. I have referenced it before. Anxious for Nothing. I'm slow to read books. It takes me forever to get through them. I get distracted, but this one's pretty interesting. They got a lot of like little quotes in there relative to anxiety. And this chapter that we're dealing with right now is about guilt. And there's a few things in there that really triggered some stuff with me, and I thought I'd share that with you guys tonight. You know, one of the quotes he had in there is that guilt sucks the life out of our souls, but grace restores it. I started talking about grace and everybody turns off the switch because you're thinking I'm going to start talking Bible stuff and everything else. But the fact of the matter is that grace is a huge part of my life. And that if I didn't have somebody let me off the mat from a spiritual component, I'm probably still drinking and running and getting in trouble. So the spiritual piece of it is really important. And for me, it is God, and grace is one of God's greatest gifts, in my opinion. But guilt, we all have guilt, regardless of your religious construct or your belief in God or not in God, or if you're an atheist or if you whatever you are, we all still struggle with the notion of guilt. And it still does the exact same thing. It drains our souls. It makes us so that we're just downtrodden all the time. You know, I've said this so many times in the show that one ways I find hope is never looking over my shoulder again. Quickest way for me to not look over my shoulder again is feel guilty about everything around me. Now, I don't know about you, how you deal with guilt, but if I start feeling guilty about something, I will then pull all things on myself. So if it's something that I've actually done and I feel guilty about it and I haven't made amends or even attempted to correct the situation, I'll then pull all other things on top of it too. And I don't know if it's like a psychological thing to mask the actual thing I did or what it is, but I do that. And for me, and possibly for you, guilt just drains you at the core. It just, it's constantly present there. It's a real deep internalized understanding that you were wrong, at least for me. So when I'm feeling guilty about something, it is my fundamental belief that at least in large part, it's my fault, whatever that situation is. And in many cases, it's an internalized recognition of that, where I haven't really expressed it to anybody. I'm just walking around with a heavy, heavy burden that is sucking on my soul and draining my energy because it's there as a burden. I think it's even worse when you're hiding something. I had one of the many ridiculous things that I've done in my life is I was unfaithful to my first wife. And I can remember just every single day having that weight on my shoulders. And it was almost a relief to be found out. It was awful. The whole experience was awful on her. It was failure for me as a man. The only thing I can say is that it put me in a situation where I'll never be unfaithful again. That's, the benefit that the relationships I've had since is that I just choose not to put myself in that situation. And where I'm at right now, is I like being faithful. I like having that, badge, so to speak, that I'm just not that guy anymore. And that's been important to me, not even so much about Sam or anybody else. It's been important for me. There's nothing worse than hiding something, it just, especially if you know you're wrong and the guilt that's there with it. And it's out of that situation that and also my subsequent criminal activity related to my drinking and all this other stuff. Before that was all found out, man, such a burden. And my hope was just drained because I was always looking over my shoulder, constantly looking over my shoulder. And it's just no way to live. And I just choose not to. To me, guilt, we become our own judge and jury, but we also are not brave enough a lot of times in guilt to actually confess what we're thinking and feeling, because we don't want that further consequence. So we're already feeling bad that we've done this sort of thing. So we feel like we're going to get away with it by hiding it. Chances are you're not going to get away with it forever, but we do believe that. But in the same time, we're constantly levying unmeasurable, insurmountable penalties on our mind. So we're literally burying ourselves in a situation and never really moving beyond it. We're wallowing. We're in the mire of this guilt and the mire of whatever it is we've done to cause that guilt to be. It's a legitimate problem. And, for me, I've found that if whatever the circumstance is, until that is confessed and brought out, and until I address the situation that I am primarily at fault for, until I address those things, I'm always going to have that weight on me, because it's always going to be the what if or the could have or the I did that. And you never get that energy out and you never move beyond it. So for me, a couple things that I have first found to be important. I've demonstrated a few shows ago, my apology show. If I'm feeling like I've been a perpetrator of something and it starts to build guilt in me and I feel like I might be hiding something, I found it far more beneficial to move through fear and confess it. Bring it out in the open. Take it out of its dark places and put it on the table. I'd far rather deal with the known response from others than to deal with the burden of what if they find out and the internal destruction that it causes me to feel guilty over circumstance. Now, I think that if you do something wrong and you're wronging somebody as a friend or a loved one or a spouse or whatever, if you've wronged somebody, I mean, you really do have to be careful about how you position things with people. You don't want to hurt people's feelings worse if you've done something really egregious, but you do need to make sure that you're getting that out. And it has to be to the offended party, I believe. Another quote that Max Lucado said in this book, he said, guilt frenzies the soul. Grace calms it. So we're talking about guilt here. It frenzies the soul. It sucks the life out of the soul, is what he's saying. And he says that grace calms it. Grace restores your soul. And so let's talk a little bit about that and what that means. For my circumstance, and I can only really, I've seen this in others as well, where the first thing is that it's exposed. I've had a number of male friends, that have had circumstances exposed rather than be the one that drives it and say, here's what I did. And I feel horrible about it. I find that when things are exposed versus you taking the reins and just owning it and saying, I did this, far worse. It's far worse. Because now there's always that question of, are you just sorry because you got caught? Are you just sorry because somebody else busted you? That's not going to solve your guilt at all. It's not going to solve the pain of somebody else. I think that extreme ownership in those circumstances where you've wronged somebody else and bringing it forward, that's the best policy on that whole thing. But the second part is the grace piece. And the reason grace is so important for me, and the reason it's been really important for me, is because many times when I'm in those circumstances where I've done things wrong, I don't really know how to fix it. Chances are I was in a circumstance in my mind that was not healthy. In many cases, it's alcohol related. Sometimes it wasn't alcohol related. My infidelity was not alcohol related. It wasn't. It was lust and pride. And both of those things I found that have destroyed me on many stages of my life. But what I found is that grace intercedes for me. And grace to me is a gift that God gives me to address circumstances as they arise. So I find myself in a bad situation. It's not Santa Claus stuff. And if I hadn't got myself out of the algorithm of what my spiritual context should be, I would have never probably been in that situation in the first place. But because I did get there, it's going to take an extreme gift to allow me to be back in the fold of where I live best. And that is with a strong spiritual component, following my steps and process, making sure I stay on course with the things that I have committed to do. Those are all really important things, but I can't get back in line with the most important part, my spiritual component, if there's no grace extended towards me. It's a free gift that's offered to me that God says, look, I expected you to be a screw up You are a screw up. I knew it before you were born. You were going to be a friggin' hot mess and you're going to drive me crazy. I feel like that's what God and talk. Honestly, I feel like a lot of times God's just like, you kidding me right now? I knew he was going to do this, but I just can't believe what I'm seeing. It's just, you feel like that a lot of times, like, oh yeah, watch this. I feel like I do that a lot with God, and what he's just like, all right, look, I got a plan for you. I got purpose for you. You're really trying to screw this up, but it doesn't change what my plan was for you and how I see you to be as a person. And so the grace that I'm offering you is to get you back in track with my plan for you, not your plan, Chris, but what I want for you. And that's where grace is super important in my life, is because it removes that guilt, because the guilt's usually coming out of my own plan and something that I've done that's gone completely awry. Grace realigns me and reorients me with the reason I was even born in the first place, what my purpose actually is. I look at, I've been talking a lot about Sam lately, and I'm not really trying to, put her story in my mouth so much, but we have a common understanding that we talk about our situations, and she's really trying to make sure that she can invest in the future in the lives of others. And, I think one of the things that she's struggling with right now is a lot of guilt. And it's debilitating, especially on top of it when you got other fears and things like that with things that you're dealing with. And I personally believe she has great purpose. I know her in a way that many don't. And some do. Some know portions of it, but I get to see the elements of her that are tremendous. And so I can't help but think that the grace that's being extended towards her right now is God one more time saying, man, you're really pushing me. However, I have a plan and purpose for you, and here's the grace extended towards you to get you back on track. It may not exactly be your plan. It might not be in the timeline that you expect. It's not going to be an instant gratification thing. You're going to have to go through a journey here, but I'm going to offer you grace all along the way if you look me in the eye. And that's a key piece of this. So what he's asking for is God was asking me to look him in the eye and say, look, follow me, and I will show you what you're here for. And as soon as I stop doing that, things get pretty sideways for me. So this episode is not really to get on here and be an evangelical show. What I want you to understand is that for me in my journey, this is how it looked, and guilt has always been a problem. It will be a derailer for me because I will take on literally every stinking thing that's wrong when I actually have done a few things wrong that I really should own, and I've been hiding them. So instead of just expose them and deal with them and go to the people that I've harmed, I'll take on every single thing else around it and never address the core issue, and then bury myself even more. And then it gets worse. And then the whole cycle of fear, controlling behavior, and procrastination starts. And I do that dance, and then I just keep spinning until I got to hide in a bottle. And it starts with guilt. And then what happens? Okay, now you screwed up in your relapse, and now I got even more guilt. You see, we've got to address this and get it out of you, get it in front of people. There's going to be a reaction, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but it's the best policy is to own it, show that you're sincerely apologetic for what you have done, and lay that on the table before people rather than have it be exposed, because then people are always going to question whether you would have done the right thing in the first place. There's one other piece that I talked about this morning. I did a daily journal, and for those of you that do follow me on TikTok and watch, I appreciate that. This channel is obviously the flagship of everything, but the TikTok is something I want to encourage people with in small bites. But over there today, I was talking about something that's really frustrating me. And I normally try to be positive and that type of thing, but I had to speak on this morning because it's very frustrating to me. This is the other side of the guilt thing. Okay. So when we are fully exposed, all right. A lot of times in recovery, when we're coming back, we're fully exposed, man. We're filleted as the best way I can put it. Our souls are raw. Our sins are open. Everybody's talking about it. Chances are most times we got criminal charges and they're all talking about that. And oh, that's the addict. And boy, you should have known better. And that is the comment that drives me crazy. So for those that are supporting those of us that share our guilt and the things that we've done wrong with you, it is entirely not helpful. And honestly, something that you should just really shut your mouth about is to sit there and look at somebody that's struggling and say, well, if you hadn't done it, you kind of did this to yourself. Well, no freaking kidding. You know what I mean? We know we did it to ourselves. Exactly what is that comment going to accomplish? Is that like a time machine where we can go back in time and fix the problem? It is not. And all it shows is your arrogance to the situation. You put yourself in a position loftier over the person that's struggling. And that's crap. Sam and I have been dealing with a lot of those comments lately, and I'm done with them. I'm checking them every single time somebody comes to us and says, well, you know, if she hadn't done this or you hadn't done that, then blah, 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 blah. Well, no friggin' kidding. We know that. You know what I mean? We understand that to be true. That comment to me didn't give me a deeper knowledge of the fact that I am a mess up or that she's messed up. It doesn't give any deeper knowledge. If you're going to come alongside and support, then be a fellow traveler and come alongside and support the areas that we need support. You're not judge and jury for somebody that's already struggling with guilt. We've already got the guilt. We don't need you to layer more on it. Just calm down for a minute, pump the brakes, take your self-righteous bag and go put it in the closet. Because if you want to come alongside somebody that's struggling and they're dealing with their guilt and they're willing to expose their sin and their trouble and their need and their heartache and their tears in front of you, your job is not to sit back and go, well, you know, you kind of did it to yourself. I got a few choice words for those people, and I can't stand those types of comments, and I'm entirely tired of it. Entirely exhausted by it, and I'm not putting up with it anymore for me or my family. Now, I'm taking a more aggressive posture on this because there's another side of the guilt. It's how we react to people that are feeling guilty too and have already been exposed and absolutely laid on the altar. How much more of an altar do you want to lay them on? You got to put a little vegetable oil in there? You know what I mean? It's like, let's stop with that. Be gracious towards them. The quotes here says, grace restores it. Grace calms it. Firing up that guilt and needling it and scratching it is not supportive. It's not being a fellow traveler. It's not supporting the person that you say you're supporting. I question whether you're actually supporting them if you think that's the right tactic. Guys, this is a big deal for me. You know, both sides of it. I mean, for my own journey, guilt has been a big problem, and especially if I try to bottle it up and don't share it. It's really important for me to expose it, lay it on the altar, and be willing to address the things that I have shortcomings on. Because if I'm not willing to do that, then I'm never going to get better, and those around me are going to suffer. So I have to have the balls to go do that. As men, we better. We better. As far as our support system, though, when you're supporting somebody that's already in that place, they're already raw and broken, we don't need you to be Captain Friggin' Obvious. Just slow your roll and listen. Many times that's all we need. You know, Theo Von was with Sean Strickland several months back. Sean Strickland was the former middleweight champion of the world. Pretty crass guy, talks about man issues, whatever. He's Mr. America. A lot of Sean's stuff I don't really care for, but this was interesting. He's an abused child, like severely abused child when he was growing up through. Very abused. Theo Von has an addiction history and has some abuse in his history as well. He's a stand-up comedian. He's a pretty funny guy, but he's got a huge heart on mental health and has spoken a lot about it. He had a middleweight Sean Strickland started crying over a question he had. And rather than Theo pushing on it, he stopped on a live interview, said, we can shut this down. And Sean's like, no, it's fine. And he stopped and said, well, I can just sit here a while with you. He didn't offer advice. He didn't try to redirect his tears. He just said, I can just sit here for a while with you. When somebody's addressing their guilt and they've exposed themselves, or they're in a situation where they've destroyed their lives, absolutely destroyed their lives. And yeah, maybe it is their choice, but right now they're trying to rebuild and it's not getting worse, or they're on the table, or they are getting worse, or whatever it is. If you've made a choice to come alongside somebody and support them in that place, zip it, sit, listen, offer help. That's your job. That's what you're doing. That's what you signed up for. It's not to levy your morals on somebody else. It's not to levy your judgment on that other person. Guys, I hope this lands the way I intended it to. I wanted all sides in this thing to consider that we're all culpable in dealing with these circumstances. If you don't want to come alongside somebody that's struggling, don't. It's better off that you don't if you don't have the right attitude along with them. But if you are struggling too, and you've got guilt in your soul, you have to expose that sucker because it's going to come out anyway. They say your sin will find you out. I can tell you 100% of the time in my life it has. It's all I don't either I'm a dumb criminal or what, but I'm telling you, it's always found out one way or another. Maybe not in the public scene, but it certainly is with my loved ones. Guys, I really appreciate you guys listening to me tonight. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart because it's been such a derailer for me. I hope this is information that's useful to you as you deal with guilt as well. I've been a little bit more aggressive than I normally am on this, partly because of some of the pain that Sam and I are going through right now with some people that are quote unquote well-meaning and they got a lot to say. I don't have any use for it. And if you're listening, you know who you are. And I don't have use for it, just so you know. So we're going through it in live and in Memorex, as they used to say when I was a kid. And what I'm asking is for you guys to consider your role in somebody else's life and consider your role in your own life when it comes to guilt. Tomorrow on the show, I'm going to be doing a recording with Antoine Preacher Evans. He's a person in recovery. He's got a really interesting backstory. As I said earlier on the TikTok, it's kind of funny to me how our for certain street names are tied to certain street hustle. It's funny to me how when we get our life back together, how sometimes that turns into something that actually is part of the good in us, and which I think is kind of funny. So yeah, I think you'll see some of that when we talk tomorrow. But I'm looking forward to our conversation with him, and I hope you guys enjoy that too. I'm going to start bringing on more people. So if you know somebody that's got an interesting backstory relative to recovery, or even just somebody that's got a high risk living story that seems to have fallen apart, I'm open to having guests on more frequently now. Just shoot me a message at chris@chrisinretro.com, chris@chrisinretro.com. Or you can go on the Instagram and just send me a message over there, and I would be more than willing to consider having more guests on here in the future. Guys, thanks for listening to me tonight. A little more aggressive tone, and that's just because it's really scratching at some things in my life, and I'm also seeing Sam hurting so desperately right now, and a lot of it is related to the subject of guilt. And I'm also seeing support systems, handle things what I would consider to be poorly. Not all of them. I want to check that we've actually got some wonderful support through this whole thing. Candidly, we've got some great support through it, but there's a few that are just kind of the same old nonsense that I used to hear when I was really struggling as well. And I just am not going to put up with it when it comes to somebody that I love. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Please like and subscribe. Comment if you will. If I've ticked you off or if you support the message, please comment. I'd love to hear what you got to say. And between now and the next time we talk, I'm going to do every single thing I can to stay out of trouble. And I hope you do too.